Chapter 38. Defrosting. The apprentice sat huddled in the corner by the fire, with Bert still hanging on to one of his dangling damp sleeves. Jenna had locked all the doors, and Nico had locked the windows, leaving Boy 412 to keep watch over the apprentice while they went to see how the bogart was. The bogart lay at the bottom of the tin bath, a small mound of damp brown fur against the white of the sheet that Aunt Zelda had laid underneath him. He half opened his eyes and regarded his visitors with a bleary, unfocused gaze. "Hello, Bogart. Are you feeling better?" asked Jenna. The bogart did not respond. Aunt Zelda dipped a sponge into a bucket of warm water and gently bathed him. "Just keeping Bogart damp," she said. "A dry bogart is not a happy bogart." "He's not looking good, is he?" Jenna whispered to Nico, as they tiptoed quietly out of the kitchen with Aunt Zelda. The hunter, still poised outside the kitchen door, regarded Jenna with a baleful stare as she appeared. His piercing pale blue eyes locked onto her and followed her across the room, but the rest of him was as immobile as ever. Jenna felt the stare and glanced up. A cold shiver shot through her. "He's looking at me," she said. "His eyes are following me." "Bother," tutted Aunt Zelda. "He's beginning to defrost. I'd better take this before it causes any more trouble." Aunt Zelda pulled the silver pistol out of the hunter's frozen hand. His eyes flashed angrily as she expertly broke open the gun and removed a small silver ball from its chamber. "Here you are," Aunt Zelda said, handing the silver bullet to Jenna. "It has been looking for you for 10 years, and now its search is over. You are safe now." Jenna smiled uncertainly and rolled the solid silver sphere around her palm with a sense of revulsion, although she could not help but admire how perfect it was. Almost perfect. She lifted it up and squinted at a tiny nick in the ball. To her surprise, there were 2 letters carved into the silver. I.P. "What's I.P. mean?" Jenna asked Aunt Zelda. "Look, it's here on the bullet." Aunt Zelda did not reply for a moment. She knew what the letters meant, but she was unsure about telling Jenna. "I.P.," murmured Jenna, thinking it over. "I.P." "Infant princess," said Aunt Zelda. "A named bullet. A named bullet will always find its target. It doesn't matter how or when, but find you it will, as yours has done, but not in the way they intended." "Oh," said Jenna quietly. "So the other one, the one for my mother, did it have—" "Yes, it did. It had Q on it." "Ah. Can I keep the pistol too?" asked Jenna. Aunt Zelda looked surprised. "Well, I suppose so," she said, "if you really want to." Jenna took the gun and held it as she had seen both the hunter and the assassin do, feeling its heavy weight in her hand and the strange sense of power holding it gave her. "Thank you," she said to Aunt Zelda, handing the pistol back to her. "Can you keep it safe for me, for now?" The hunter's eyes followed Aunt Zelda as she marched the pistol off to her unstable potions and particular poisons cupboard and locked it away. They followed her back again as she walked up to him and felt his ears. The hunter looked furious. His eyebrows twitched and his eyes flashed angrily, but nothing else moved. "Good," said Aunt Zelda. "His ears are still frozen. He can't hear what we say yet. We've got to decide what we'll do with him before he defrosts." "Can't you just refreeze him?" asked Jenna. Aunt Zelda shook her head. "No," she replied regretfully. "You shouldn't refreeze someone once they start to defrost. It's not safe for them. They can get freezer burn, or else go horribly soggy. Not a nice sight. But still, the hunter's a dangerous man, and he won't give up the hunt, ever, and somehow we have to stop him hunting us." Jenna was thinking. "We need," she said, "to make him forget everything, even who he is." She chuckled. "We could make him think he's a lion tamer or something. And then he'd join a circus and find out that he wasn't, just after he'd put his head into a lion's mouth," Nico finished. "We must not use magic to endanger life," Aunt Zelda reminded them. "He could be a clown then," said Jenna. "He's scary enough." "Well, I have heard there's a circus due in the port any day now. I'm sure he'd find work." Aunt Zelda smiled. "They take all sorts, I'm told." Aunt Zelda fetched an old tattered book called Magic Memories. "You're good at this," she said, handing the book to Boy 412. "Can you find the right charm for me? I think it's called Rogue Recollections." Boy 412 leafed through the musty old book. It was one of those where most of the charms had been lost, but toward the end of the book he found what he was looking for. A small knotted handkerchief with some smudgy black writing along the hem. Good, said Aunt Zelda. Perhaps you could do the spell for us, please. Me? Asked Boy 412, surprised. If you wouldn't mind, replied Aunt Zelda. My eyesight isn't up to it in this light. She reached up and checked the hunter's ears. They were warm. The hunter glared at her and narrowed his eyes in that familiar cold stare. No one took any notice. He can hear now, she said. Best get this done before he can speak, too. Boy 412 carefully read the spell's instructions. Then he held the knotted handkerchief and said, Whatever your history may be, 'tis lost to you when you see me. Boy 412 waved the handkerchief in front of the hunter's angry eyes. Then he undid the knot. With that, the hunter's eyes went blank. His gaze was no longer threatening, but bewildered and maybe a little frightened. Good, said Aunt Zelda. That seems to have worked well. Can you do the next bit now, please? Boy 412 said quietly, So listen to your new-sprung ways. Remember now your different days. Aunt Zelda planted herself in front of the hunter and addressed him firmly. This, she told him, is the story of your life. You were born in a hovel down in the port. You were a horrible child, Jenna told him, and you had pimples. No one liked you, added Nico. The hunter began to look very unhappy. Except your dog, said Jenna, who was beginning to feel just a bit sorry for him. Your dog died, said Nico. The hunter looked devastated. Nico, remonstrated Jenna, don't be mean. Me? What about him? And so the hunter's horribly tragic life unfolded before him. It was riddled with unfortunate coincidences, stupid mistakes, and highly embarrassing moments that made his newly defrosted ears go red at their sudden recollection. At last the sad tale was finished off with his unhappy apprenticeship to an irascible clown, known to all who worked for him as Dog Breath. The apprentice watched with a mixture of glee and horror. The hunter had tormented him for so long, and the apprentice was glad to see someone who was at last getting the better of him, but he could not help but wonder what they were planning to do to him. As the sorry tale of the hunter's past ended, Boy 412 re-knotted the handkerchief and said, What was your life has gone away. Another past does now hold sway. With some effort they carried the hunter outside like a large unwieldy plank, and set him up beside the mott, so that he could finish defrosting out of the way. The Magyk paid him no attention whatsoever, having just scooped its 38th shield bug out of the mug, and began preoccupied with whether to take the wings off this one before it liquefied it or not. Give me a nice garden gnome any day, said Aunt Zelda, regarding her new and, she hoped, temporary garden ornament with distaste. But that's a job well done. Now all we've got to sort out is the apprentice. Septimus, mused Jenna. I can't believe it. What will Mum and Dad say? He's so horrible. Well, I suppose growing up with Dom Daniel hasn't done him any good, said Aunt Zelda. Boy 412 grew up in the young army, but he's okay, Jenna pointed out. He would never have shot the bogart. I know, agreed Aunt Zelda, but maybe the apprentice, Septimus, will improve with time. Maybe, said Jenna doubtfully. Some time later, in the early hours of the morning, when Boy 412 had carefully tucked the green rock that Jenna gave him under his quilt to keep it warm and close to him, and just as they were at last settling down to sleep, there was a hesitant knock on the door. Jenna sat up scared. Who was it? She nudged Nico and Boy 412 awake. Then she crept over to the window and silently drew back one of the shutters. Nico and Boy 412 stood by the door, armed with a broom and a heavy lamp. The apprentice sat up in his dark corner by the fire, and smiled a smug smile. Dom Daniel had sent a rescue party for him. It was no rescue party, but Jenna went pale when she saw who it was. It's the hunter, she whispered. He's not coming in, said Nico. No way. But the hunter knocked again, louder. Go away, Jenna yelled at him. Aunt Zelda came out from tending the bogart. See what he wants, she said, and we can send him on his way. So, against all her instincts, Jenna opened the door to the hunter. She hardly recognized him. Although he still wore the uniform of a hunter, he no longer looked like one. He had gathered his thick green cloak around him like a beggar with a blanket, and he stood in the doorway apologetically and slightly stooped. "I'm sorry to trouble you gentlefolk at this late hour," he murmured, "but I fear I have lost my way. I wonder if you could direct me to the port?" "That way," said Jenna curtly, pointing out over the marshes. The hunter looked confused. "I am not very good at finding my way, miss. Where exactly would that be?" "Follow the moon," Aunt Zelda told him. "She will guide you." The hunter bowed humbly. "Thank you kindly, madam. I wonder if I could trouble you by asking if there might be a circus due in town. I have hopes of obtaining a position there as a buffoon." Jenna smothered a giggle. "Yes, there is, as it happens," Aunt Zelda told him. Would you wait a minute?" She disappeared into the kitchen and came back with a small bag containing some bread and cheese. "Take this," she said, "and good luck with your new life." The hunter bowed again. "Why, thank you kindly, madam," he said, and walked down to the motte, passing the sleeping Magog and his thin black canoe without a flicker of recognition, and out over the bridge. 4 silent figures stood at the doorway and watched the solitary figure of the hunter pick his way uncertainly across the Moram marshes toward his new life in Fishhead and Durdle's Traveling Circus and Menagerie, until a cloud covered the moon and the marshes were once again plunged into darkness.